My grandpa gave me and my brother a house, but he sold his own for cash, then took over mine. For years, he acted successful while hiding the truth. Things took a turn when my grandpa found me sleeping in my car. It was around 3 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of someone tapping on my car window. My neck was sore from the angle I'd fallen asleep in. My legs cramped and the blanket I'd brought wasn't doing much against the freezing wind slipping in through the cracked passenger window. I jolted upright, wiped the fog off the glass, and there he was, my grandfather. His silver hair was messily tucked under a flat cap, and he had that same puzzled, gentle expression he always wore when something didn't make sense. Except this time it was me who didn't make sense. His voice was muffled through the glass, but I heard the words as clear as if they were inside my head. "The house I gave you, didn't you like it?" I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. My throat locked up and I stared at him like a deer in headlights, because what do you even say to that? That the house he thought I'd been living in for 4 years was never mine. That his own grandson, my older brother, had snatched it before I even got the keys. I should back up. My name's Zach. I'm 27 now, but this started back when I was 23. Grandpa had just finalized the estate plan after Grandma passed, and he wanted to make sure me and my brother Evan were set for life, as he put it. Evan's 31 now, so he was 27 at the time. And growing up, everyone saw him as the responsible one. He got straight A's, played varsity tennis, and called Grandma every Sunday without fail. Me, I was the kid who built weird robots out of toasters and got suspended for hacking the school's grading system just to prove I could. I won't lie, I gave my family a few too many reasons to worry about me. But I've been turning things around. I was going to community college for HVAC certification, working part-time, fixing up busted heaters, and actually saving up. I wasn't the golden child, but I was trying. Anyway, Grandpa sat us both down at his kitchen table one afternoon. I remember the smell of his pipe tobacco still clinging to the air and the way the light from the window made the wood grain on the table shine. He had this brown folder and handed us each a paper from inside. "I'm giving you both something now," he said, looking between us, "so I can see you enjoy it while I'm still around." The paper in my hand was the deed to a 2-bedroom house out on Martin Street. It wasn't anything fancy, but it was solid, had a decent-sized yard, a garage, and even a little shed out back. The kind of place a guy like me could build a life in. Evan's paper was for a house on the nicer side of town, closer to the river. More modern, more square footage, but still both were generous gifts. Grandpa told us he'd paid off the properties in full and had transferred the deeds into our names. "I trust you both to use it well," he said, smiling. "No selling them until you've lived in them at least a year. After that, it's up to you." I was speechless. I wanted to hug him right then and there, but I think I was too stunned to move. Evan just nodded and thanked him, smooth and composed as always. He always knew how to say the right thing. Me. I stumbled through a thank you and promised I'd take care of it. I meant it. Things started going sideways pretty fast after that. I went by the Martin Street house 2 days later. It was still locked up empty, waiting for me. I had a friend with a truck who was going to help me move the few things I owned. A mattress, a desk, a bunch of toolboxes. But when I pulled into the driveway, there was already a car parked there. Evan's car. At first, I figured maybe he was checking out my place while he waited for his keys to the river house. Maybe he was just curious, but when I knocked on the door, no one answered. And when I peeked through the window, I saw boxes stacked inside his boxes. One of them had his name written on it in Sharpie Evans books. I knocked again. Still nothing. I was about to leave when the door opened a crack. And there he was, smiling that practiced, calm smile that always made my stomach twist a little. "Oh, hey," he said like he was surprised to see me. "I figured I'd get things started here while they sort out the paperwork on my place." "What do you mean?" I asked. "This is mine." He blinked. "No, it's not. I thought you were getting the river house." There was a pause, just a few seconds, but it felt like my brain had to fight through molasses to process what he was saying. "Grandpa gave me the deed to this house," I told him, pulling the paper out of my backpack. I kept it with me because I couldn't believe it was real. I'd been rereading it every day like it was a dream I didn't want to wake up from. He looked at the paper like it was a joke. Then with that same casual shrug he always used when brushing something off, he said, "We must have gotten them mixed up. Don't worry, I already moved most of my stuff here. Just settle into the river house. It's way nicer anyway." It was like being slapped without the actual slap. I stood there for a second, not sure what to say. He already had furniture in there, boxes, curtains. He had moved in. And me, I was still sleeping on my buddy's couch, waiting to make this place mine. I should have called Grandpa then and there. I know that now, but I was raised not to stir up trouble, not to tattle. and a part of me, some stupid loyal part, thought maybe Evan really had gotten confused, that maybe this was a mix-up. I went back to the River House address hoping I'd find it empty or with a note saying, "Welcome home" or something. It wasn't empty. There was a for sale sign in front of it. I called the real estate company, and the woman on the line confirmed that the property had just been listed, paid off deed, signed over to Evan, and immediately put on the market. That's when it hit me like a ton of bricks. There was no mix-up. He took the house Grandpa meant for me, moved in before I could claim it, and sold his house to cash in quick before anyone could say a word. Maybe he thought I'd never find out. Maybe he knew I'd be too passive, too slow to call Grandpa and make a scene. Maybe he thought I'd just disappear. And honestly, for a while, I did. I didn't have anywhere to go. My buddy's lease ended and I didn't want to impose. The money I'd saved went fast between gas, food, and motel. I started sleeping in my car behind the shop I worked at, showered at the gym, told people I was between places. Every time I looked at that deed in my backpack, I felt like an idiot, like a fool who let his brother outmaneuver him again. Evan ignored my texts, then blocked me. He started posting pictures online of him grinding real estate and investing smart. He was bragging about flipping Grandpa's house for a massive profit. And Grandpa, he just thought I was off doing my thing. He's not online. He didn't know I wasn't living in the place he gave me, and I couldn't bring myself to tell him. Not then. So when he found me in my car that night and asked, "Didn't you like the house I gave you?" I didn't know how to answer. I just stared. And then before I could make up some half-lie to protect his feelings, he reached into his coat, pulled out the manila envelope I hadn't seen in years, and held it up. "I want the deeds back," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. He knew. And that's when things really started unraveling. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't slam his hand against the car roof or demand an explanation. My grandfather just looked at me with the kind of quiet disappointment that cuts deeper than any angry outburst ever could. That was the worst part, his silence. I opened the car door and stepped out, suddenly ashamed of the fast food wrappers on the passenger seat, the blanket bundled behind me, the duffel bag with my entire life in it. I tried to stand tall, but my knees felt like they might give out. "Grandpa," I started, then stopped, because what was I supposed to say? That his trust had been misplaced. That Evan, his golden boy, had screwed us both. He didn't press, he just handed me the envelope. I went through the copies of the estate documents. He said they were never mixed up. I gave you the Martin Street house, and Evan got the River one, but I saw photos online, a listing his name on the paperwork, and then I couldn't reach you, and now I find you sleeping here. He looked down at the pavement and let out a breath, like all the weight of the last 4 years was finally catching up to him. "Zach," he said, "do you still have your copy of the deed?" I nodded and fumbled for my backpack. My fingers trembled as I pulled out the folded paper, its edges soft from how many times I'd opened it, stared at it, hoped it would mean something again. He took it, gently scanned it, and tucked it into the envelope without a word. "Come on," he said. "Let's go to my place." I didn't argue. He didn't say much on the drive, just turned up the heater and let the radio fill the silence with static and old country music. I kept waiting for him to ask more. Why I didn't tell him why I let Evan get away with it, but he didn't. And that somehow made it worse. Because I wanted him to be angry. I wanted him to yell, to be furious, to make it easier for me to finally explode. But instead, he was just quiet, reflective. Back at his house, the one he'd lived in since I was a kid, he made a pot of tea and warmed up a frozen casserole. I hadn't eaten a proper meal in days, and the smell of baked pasta hit me like a hug. I didn't realize I needed. He set a plate in front of me, poured tea into a chipped mug, and sat across the table. The same table where he gave us those deeds for years ago. "I want you to tell me everything," he said finally, from the beginning. And I did. I told him about the day I showed up to Martin Street and found Evan's car in the driveway. About how Evan claimed the deeds had gotten mixed up, and how I'd gone to check on the River House and found it was already listed for sale. How Evan ghosted me, blocked my number, and sold the property within a few weeks. I told him how I tried to hold on to hope, tried to convince myself it was a misunderstanding, that Evan would come clean or Grandpa would step in. But weeks turned into months, and then a year passed, then 2, then 4. And during all that time, I never told him, because I didn't want to break his heart, because I didn't want to look weak. Because I still had this stupid, fragile hope that somehow it would fix itself. He didn't interrupt once, just listened, nodding occasionally, his face unreadable. When I finished, he got up, walked to the cabinet by the hallway, and pulled out a black binder. Inside were photocopies of every major document he'd ever signed. Deeds, insurance, medical, you name it. He flipped to a section marked with a red tab and pulled out a second copy of the original estate transfer. It matched mine exactly. "This is what I gave you," he said. "Evan's property was different. This wasn't a mix-up." "I know," I said quietly. "And you just let him take it." That stung, but I deserved it. I didn't know what to do. And by the time I wanted to fight, it felt too late. He already sold it. I thought maybe I could move on, start over. I don't know. I guess I just gave up. He looked at me long and hard, then stood up and walked to the phone. I watched as he dialed, watched as his face hardened. He didn't put it on speaker, but I could hear Evan's voice on the other end, cheerful, confident. Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He just said, "I need you to come by tomorrow. We need to talk about the houses." There was a pause, then a clipped, "Yes, I know. Be here at noon." He hung up and turned back to me. "You're staying here tonight." That was the beginning of the unraveling. The next morning, Grandpa was already up before me, sitting in the living room with the binder open on his lap. I could hear him making calls, first to the county clerk's office, then to a lawyer he used to work with at the mill back in the day. He didn't sound angry, just focused, determined. At 12:04 p.m. sharp, Evan pulled into the driveway in his spotless silver Lexus. He stepped out wearing a designer coat and holding a coffee that probably cost more than the gas in my car. He walked in like he owned the place, all smiles, and said, "Hey, Pops," like nothing had ever happened. His eyes flicked over to me and he paused. "Zach," he said with that fake warmth that made my skin crawl. "Sit down," Grandpa said, not bothering with pleasantries. Evan frowned slightly but did as he was told. The silence that followed was thick, heavy. Grandpa slid the envelope across the table. "What's this?" Evan asked, glancing inside. "The original deed transfers." "No deed," Grandpa said. "Yours and Zach's." Evan gave a little laugh. "Oh, come on. We talked about this years ago. The papers got mixed up. I thought we already cleared that up." "They weren't mixed up," Grandpa interrupted. "I gave you the river house. You sold it. You made nearly $200,000 profit from something I gave you to live in. And then you moved into Zach's house and locked him out." That's not Evan started, but Grandpa held up a hand. "I'm not finished. You've been lying to me for 4 years. You've let your brother live in his car while you flaunted your lifestyle online like some kind of mogul. I trusted you. I gave you both a gift, and you turned it into a way to rob your own blood." Evan's jaw tightened. "You gave us the houses. No conditions. It was a gift. What I do with mine is my business." Grandpa leaned forward. "It stopped being your business when you took his too." There was a long silence. Evan's face hardened. "You're acting like I did something illegal. I didn't forge anything. I didn't steal. You gave me something. I made it work. If Zach didn't have the guts to stand up for himself, that's not on me." I clenched my fists under the table, but Grandpa beat me to the response. "You're right," he said. "It's not illegal, but it is cruel, and it ends now." Evan's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" "You're going to fix this," Grandpa said. "You're going to sign over the Martin Street house to Zach today. I've already got the transfer papers ready, and you're going to apologize." Evan let out a dry laugh. "No, I'm not. I don't care how angry you are. That house is mine now. You can't just take it back." "I can't," Grandpa said. "But you can. And if you don't, I'll make sure everyone in the family knows what you did. I'll talk to your clients, your investors. I'll tell them how you built your success online to your own grandfather. And I'll use every dollar I have to make sure you don't profit off of it for another second." Evan stood up. "You wouldn't sit down," Grandpa said, his voice low and cold. And Evan did. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in my brother's eyes. Not because of some legal threat, but because for the first time he realized he wasn't the favorite anymore. He realized Grandpa saw through him. But he still didn't fold. Instead, he said, "If you want a war, you'll get one." And he walked out the front door, slamming it behind him. Grandpa didn't say anything for a long time after that, just stared at the spot where Evan had been sitting. When he finally spoke, his voice was tired. "I don't know what happened to him. I really thought he was better than this. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat with him." That night, Grandpa called his lawyer again. He asked him to review every document Evan had signed, every loophole, every option. He said, "We weren't going to let this end here." And that's when the real battle began. Grandpa always used to say, sometimes life doesn't hit you with a punch. It just slowly turns up the pressure until something snaps. That week I learned exactly what he meant. After Evan stormed out, I thought things might calm down. I thought maybe he'd cool off, see reason, and we could work something out. I was wrong. 2 days later, I came back from running an errand, picking up some fresh bolts and pipe fittings for Grandpa's busted water heater, and found a manila envelope taped to the front door. It wasn't from Evan. It was from his lawyer. Inside was a cease and desist order. It claimed I had no legal right to the Martin Street property. It accused me of defamation and slander for statements I'd supposedly made to Grandpa. The letter was typed in cold, clinical legal language, but the message underneath was loud and clear. Stay down or we'll bury you. I remember standing on the porch holding the paper in one hand and a wrench in the other, staring at the words like they were written in some alien language. It didn't make sense. Evan knew the truth. He knew what he'd done, but instead of fixing it, he was doubling down. I handed the letter to Grandpa in silence. He read it, jaw tightening, and then calmly walked to the fireplace, opened the screen, and tossed the whole envelope into the flames. We don't scare easy, he said, but I did not of Evan, not even of the lawsuit, but of what it meant. That this wasn't just going to be a family squabble we could patch up with a few awkward dinners and some forced apologies. This was war, and I wasn't sure I was built for it. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork meetings with Grandpa's old lawyer and sleepless nights. I started sleeping on the pull-out couch in the den. Not because Grandpa made me. He offered me his room more than once, but because I didn't feel like I deserved comfort yet. I'd let this mess spiral out of control. I'd wasted 4 years of silence, and now it felt like every second I'd ignored it was dragging us deeper into the mud. The lowest point came one night around 2 a.m. I was sitting in the backyard nursing a mug of cold tea and staring at the stars. I hadn't worked in weeks. I'd ghosted my job at the HVAC shop without even meaning to. One missed shift turned into 3, and then my manager stopped calling. I didn't blame him. My head wasn't in it anymore. I didn't even know who I was outside of this mess with Evan. For so long, my only goal had been to not make waves. Now I was drowning in them. I thought about giving up. Seriously, just disappearing. Let Evan keep the house. Let Grandpa forget the whole thing. Start over in some other town with a different name. But when I turned back toward the house, I saw a light on in the kitchen. And there was Grandpa still at the table, still going through his binder, making notes, highlighting things, fighting for me even when I couldn't fight for myself. That night I made a decision. I couldn't just sit there anymore. I needed to earn the house Grandpa tried to give me. Not by proving anything to Evan, but by becoming the kind of person I could respect again. So I started rebuilding quietly. At first it was small things. Fixing the leaking pipe under the kitchen sink. Cleaning out Grandpa's garage, which hadn't been touched in years, taking over the grocery runs. Then I called my old boss at the HVAC shop, apologized, told him the truth. Not the whole mess, just that I'd been dealing with personal stuff, and let it consume me. To my surprise, he told me he'd been in worse spots himself. And then he gave me a shot part-time to start 2 days a week. It wasn't much, but it felt like the first breath of air after being underwater too long. I threw myself into the work. I'd always been good with my hands. And returning to that, the hiss of air compressors, the click of thermostat relays, the feeling of solving a problem no one else could reminded me who I used to be before all this. Before Evan turned me into a ghost. Every paycheck I got, I split in two. Half for immediate bills, half into a savings account marked rebuild. My goal wasn't just to get back the house, it was to become the kind of man who deserved to walk into that house again with his head high. I also started taking online courses. Nothing fancy, just community college level stuff, basic electrical theory, small business finance, a course on real estate law. Ironically, it helped me sleep at night having something to focus on other than court documents and Evan's smug Instagram posts. Because of course, Evan didn't stop. He kept posting photos of his investment journey, lounging poolside, driving rented sports cars, hosting parties in his house. My house, the Martin Street place, had been completely remodeled. New paint, new patio, even a new driveway. All designed to increase its value before he tried to flip it. That's when I knew what he was really doing. He wasn't just squatting in the house to make a point. He was biding his time waiting for the dust to settle so he could quietly sell it for profit just like he did with the River House. That house wasn't just a roof to him, it was a pawn, and I was the idiot who'd let him take it off the board. But not this time. Not anymore. With the help of Grandpa's lawyer, Mr. Langley, a wiry, sharp-eyed man in his 70s who looked like he'd been preparing for this fight since Nixon was in office, we filed a quiet title action. That's a legal proceeding used to establish ownership of a property when there's a dispute over the title. It wasn't cheap. Grandpa dipped into his savings and I added everything I could. But once it was filed, it meant Evan couldn't just sell the house without alerting the court. When he got served with the notice, he lost it. How do I know? Because he showed up unannounced. Middle of the day, pulled up in his Lexus like he owned the street and marched right up to Grandpa's porch. While I was out back cleaning the gutters, I heard the slam of the screen door before I even saw his face. "You filed a suit against me." Evan's voice was sharp, theatrical. "Are you insane? Do you know what this is going to do to my reputation?" I stepped into the hallway, wiping my hands on a rag, and met his eyes. "Good," I said. "Maybe next time you'll think twice before stealing from your own family." He laughed loud, exaggerated. "I didn't steal anything. I earned that house. I improved it. I paid property taxes on it. You don't just get to swoop in after 4 years and claim squatters' rights." Grandpa stood slowly from his armchair, calm as ever. "You paid taxes on land that wasn't yours. That's not ownership. That's arrogance. I made that house 10 times better than it was." Evan snapped. "Zach didn't even move in. He didn't want it." "I did want it," I said quietly. "I just thought you were better than this. I thought if I waited long enough you'd do the right thing." He scoffed. "You're pathetic, always waiting. Always hoping someone else will fix your mess." Grandpa stepped between us. "Get off my porch." Evan turned to him like he couldn't believe his ears. "You're siding with him after everything I've done for this family. You didn't do anything for this family." Grandpa said, "You did it for yourself." Evan's face twisted into something I didn't recognize. A mix of fury and panic. For the first time, he realized the house wasn't the only thing he was losing. He turned and stormed out without another word. And just like that, the tide started to shift. The court process was slow. Weeks passed, then months. But during that time, something unexpected happened. I kept growing. I got promoted at work, started handling more clients directly. People liked me, they trusted me. One woman even called to thank me after I fixed her heating system during a snowstorm and brought extra blankets just in case. I moved out of Grandpa's place and rented a small studio nearby. Nothing fancy, but it was mine. Paid for with money I earned. Not gifted, not stolen mine. Grandpa came by often. We'd sit on the tiny balcony and sip coffee while he told stories about my grandma or teased me about my awful cooking. And I started to feel something I hadn't felt in years. Like myself again. Not the screw-up, not the other brother, just Zach. And that's when the court date was finally set. The final showdown was coming. But before that happened, something else broke the silence. Something I never saw coming. And it changed everything. If you had asked me 6 months earlier what revenge looked like, I probably would have said something dumb like slashing tires or making a dramatic speech at Thanksgiving dinner. But the truth is, real revenge isn't loud. It's not a single act. It's a quiet plan that builds day by day while the other person doesn't even realize the ground beneath them is shifting. That's exactly what happened when the letter arrived. It came in a plain envelope with no return address, no fancy law firm branding, just my name typed neatly on the front. At first, I thought it was another petty move by Evan. Maybe one last threat before a court date. But when I opened it, the first thing I saw was a set of scanned documents, property listings, emails, and finally a scanned photo of a check. I read it twice, then a third time. By the time I finished, my heart was pounding so hard I had to sit down because what I held in my hands wasn't a threat. It was a gift from someone who wanted to see Evan fall just as badly as I did. I don't know her full name, and maybe that's for the best, but she signed the bottom of the letter MM, and the first line of her message was burned into my brain. "You don't know me, but I used to work with your brother. Thought you deserved to know what kind of man he really is." The rest of the letter read like a confession mixed with a takedown. Mom explained that she had been involved with Evan during the early years of his so-called real estate empire. They had worked at the same mid-tier agency. She was the admin assistant, he was the rookie agent with a Rolex he couldn't afford and a portfolio of lies. According to her, Evan wasn't just unethical, he was careless. He'd forged signatures, used family money to float illegal deals, and once listed a house without even informing the owners, a stunt that nearly landed him in court before Grandpa bailed him out behind closed doors. But what really caught my attention was the check $18,000 made out to a consultant under a shell company that just so happened to trace back to Evan's personal account. It was dated 6 months after Grandpa gifted us the houses. The memo read, "Renovation fees Martin Street," except no renovations had been done at that point. I knew this because I'd been there the day Evan had moved in without a single stick of furniture, claiming he thought it was his house. He hadn't changed a single light bulb yet. But here he was writing himself a check for renovations using investor funds. Fraud on paper, on purpose, and potentially devastating if brought to light. The letter ended with a final note from MM. He burned bridges on the way up. Maybe it's time someone reminded him how far he has to fall. That night I sat on the balcony of my studio staring at the city lights, the letter in my lap, and something new in my chest. Not rage, not even relief, resolve. Because I realized something that night. I didn't just want my house back anymore. I didn't just want justice. I wanted Evan to finally learn that consequences exist even for him, and I was going to be the one to deliver them. Step 1 was understanding the full scope of what I had. I brought the documents to Mr. Langley the next morning. His eyes widened as he flipped through the pages. This is good, he said slowly. This could change everything legally. I asked. He nodded. Potentially. Fraud undermines every transaction it's connected to. If your brother used falsified documents or misrepresented himself financially to claim the house, we can argue not only for the return of the property, but for punitive damages as well. Punitive. That was a word that had weight. It didn't just mean getting something back, it meant making someone pay. But Langley warned me not to rush. You want this to stick, he said. No drama, no theatrics, paper trails, court filings, and a bulletproof timeline. Quiet, steady pressure until it all cracks. That became the new plan. Step 2 was gathering allies. Grandpa had already given me more than I could ask for. His support, his house, his lawyer. But now I needed more. I needed witnesses. So I started calling. I reached out to my old HVAC clients. A few of them had worked with Evan when buying or selling their homes. I asked if they'd be willing to write statements not about the house situation, but about Evan's behavior. One woman, a retired teacher named Nora, didn't hesitate. "Oh, I remember that snake," she said. Tried to pressure me into buying a flood-prone property. Told me it was charming and full of potential while hiding the mold behind cheap wallpaper. She ended up giving me a full written account including photos and receipts from the inspection report he conveniently failed to mention. Another client remembered Evan offering to take care of paperwork if they didn't feel like reading the fine print. Red flag central. Step 3 was time. We waited. The court date was 2 months away, and I spent every day tightening the net. I worked full shifts at the shop, spent evenings reading up on legal procedure, and weekends going through Evan's social media with a fine-tooth comb. He loved to brag about deals, about connections, about parties thrown at his house. Every post, every caption, every timestamp became evidence, not just in court, but in the court of public opinion. Langley helped me prepare a comprehensive dossier. It wasn't just about the stolen house anymore. It was a pattern of deceit, a lifestyle built on exploitation. And every page made me realize how far Evan had fallen and how long he'd been dragging everyone else down with him. But revenge isn't just about legal documents and quiet meetings. Sometimes it needs a spark. That came from an unexpected source, my cousin Jessica. She and Evan had always had a strained relationship. Back in the day, he used to tease her for studying social work instead of something that pays. But she'd built a solid life, worked at a nonprofit, married a sweet guy named Darren, and stayed out of the family drama until she called me one evening. "Hey," she said, "I heard about the lawsuit. Thought you should know." Evan tried to pull something on Darren. Apparently, Evan had reached out to Darren offering him a once-in-a-lifetime investment opportunity. Some shady new housing development with inflated numbers and 0 permits. Darren had declined, but Evan had been persistent, aggressive even. He said we'd regret it. Jessica told me, said we were too small-minded to see the big picture. I asked if they had any of it in writing. She sent me the text an hour later. Step 4 was the narrative. By this point, I wasn't just preparing for court. I was preparing for a reveal. I wanted everything to come out, not just legally, but publicly. I wanted Evan's mask to shatter in front of everyone who'd ever praised him, trusted him, envied him. So I drafted a statement, a clear, detailed account of everything he'd done, backed by evidence, signed statements, and legal filings. I wasn't going to post it online, but I printed 20 copies and mailed them to every investor, every client I could trace through his real estate coaching business. I even mailed one to him because I wanted him to know it was coming. The fallout began in whispers. A week before the court date, his social media accounts went dark. No more humble brag posts. No more flashy dinner photos. Then one of his old clients left a review on a real estate forum titled, "Be careful. This guy nearly cost me everything." By the time court week rolled around, Evan had gone full ghost mode. But I wasn't worried. I was ready. Grandpa and I stood outside the courthouse that morning in our best suits. He looked tired, but proud. I felt nervous, but calm. "You sure about this?" he asked. I nodded. "I'm not doing this out of spite," I said. "I'm doing it because he needs to be stopped." He put a hand on my shoulder. "Then, let's finish what he started." We walked into the building as the bailiff called our names. And as the doors closed behind us, I knew one thing for certain. Evan had taken everything from me once. This time I was taking everything back. And he didn't even see it coming. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not just the temperature, but the atmosphere. Sterile, precise, the kind of place where words weighed more than emotions. No dramatic shouting, no slamming fists, just facts laid bare, dissected, and judged. Evan was already seated at the defendant's table when Grandpa and I walked in. His suit was too sharp, too pressed, like he was playing dress-up in a role he thought he owned. He didn't look at me not once, just stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, eyes flat, but his hands were fidgeting. That was the first sign. The man who once boasted about controlling rooms couldn't even control his fingers. Our side opened with Mr. Langley. He was methodical, unflinching, laying out the timeline, introducing the original deed Grandpa had gifted me, showing the court the verified copies, the signature transfers, and even the listing history of the river house that Evan had flipped for profit within weeks of the estate gift. The judge, a woman in her early 50s with no time for nonsense, asked sharp questions. Langley answered every single one without missing a beat. Then came the letter. Langley didn't present it dramatically. He simply handed it to the clerk and said, "Exhibit D, financial documentation submitted by a third party. We have verified its contents through a registered forensic accountant." That check, the one Evan wrote to himself for renovations that hadn't happened, was now legal ammunition. Combined with the investor statements and the forged listing history we had managed to pull from public records, it painted a very different picture of Evan. Not a savvy investor, not a wrong sibling in a legal misunderstanding, but a liar, a fraud, and worst of all, a thief who stole from his own family. Evan's attorney, some young guy fresh out of law school with a flashy watch and a permanently condescending smile, tried to spin the story. He argued that there was no official written condition on the gift from Grandpa, that Evan had simply acted in good faith during a confusion over paperwork. He suggested I was bitter, that this was about jealousy and family drama, not facts. But then the judge asked one simple question. Did your client sell the house assigned to him in the deed transfer within 6 weeks of receiving it? Yes, Your Honor, the attorney admitted. And did he then take residence in the property assigned to his brother? Yes. And did he block all communication and claim full ownership without legal reassignment of the title? There was a long pause before he muttered, "Yes." And that was it. The truth didn't need fireworks, it just needed sunlight. 3 days later, the court issued the ruling. The Martin Street house was to be returned to me in full legal ownership. Evan was ordered to vacate within 30 days, pay back property taxes he had wrongly claimed. And this was the part one didn't see coming. The judge also ruled that because he had profited off the sale of the river house, in contradiction of the 1-year occupancy clause written in Grandpa's original gift agreement, he owed our grandfather restitution, $195,000 payable within 60 days. The moment that ruling was read, Evan's mask shattered. His face flushed, his hands trembled, and for the first time in my life, I watched him crack. He stood up and barked. "This is a joke, right? You can't be serious." His lawyer tried to pull him back down, but he yanked away. "You're punishing me for making smart business decisions. This is just family politics dressed up in a courtroom." The judge didn't even blink. "Mr. Callahan, sit down or I will have the bailiff remove you." Evan sat and he didn't look at me once, as the court dismissed. The next few weeks were strange, almost dreamlike, like the weight I'd carried for years was slowly peeling away, but I didn't quite believe it yet. Evan tried to stall the payment, filed an appeal. It was denied. Grandpa didn't say much during those days. But one morning, as we sat on my tiny studio balcony watching the sun rise over the city, he handed me a set of keys. "I had the locks changed," he said. "It's yours now, officially." I didn't take them at first. I just looked at him and said, "I didn't do this for the house anymore." He nodded slowly. "I know, but I think you earned it anyway." I moved into the Martin Street house the next week. It was still half painted, half renovated from Evan's rushed upgrades. The patio was cracked from poor concrete work. The sink was leaky, and the wiring in the guest room was a fire hazard. But it was mine. I spent the next 6 months rebuilding it the right way. I didn't just fix it. I restored it with my hands, with the skills I'd earned, and with a new appreciation for everything I used to take for granted. Grandpa helped when he could, though mostly he sat in a lawn chair out front, offering sarcastic commentary and asking when I'd finally repaint the shutters. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was proof of growth, of redemption, of how far I'd come. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I'd finally stood up for myself. As for Evan, he disappeared for a while, sold the Lexus, shut down his online profiles. I heard through the grapevine that several of his former investors pulled out of their contracts, and at least one filed a separate suit for misrepresentation. Word gets around in real estate, especially when court records are public. Last I heard, he was living in a rented condo 2 towns over, working under a different brokerage, struggling to rebuild. Part of me wanted to feel bad to reach out to patch things up, now that justice had been served. But then I remembered the night I slept in my car, and the look on Grandpa's face when he realized his trust had been broken. No, Evan made his bed, let him lie in it. Months passed. Then came Christmas. Grandpa hosted like always, but this time I brought the food. I cooked the entire dinner in my kitchen and drove it over in the same pickup I'd used to haul scrap pipe and broken thermostats. I brought my tools too, fixed Grandpa's sink, finally repainted his hallway like I promised 2 years ago. And after dinner, while everyone else sat around the fire, Grandpa called for a toast. He stood with his glass in hand and looked around the room. "I've made a lot of mistakes," he said. "I gave things too soon, trusted too easily, and let silence become a substitute for peace. But I've also learned something. You don't really know someone until they've been tested, until life squeezes them, and you see what spills out." Then he turned to me. "I've never been prouder than I am right now. Not because of what you got back, but because of the man you became getting there." Everyone raised their glasses. And in that moment, with the firelight flickering, the room full of laughter, and the keys to my home finally heavy in my pocket where they belonged, I realized something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I was free. Not just from Evan, but from the fear that I wasn't enough. I still drive by the old river house sometimes. It's changed owners again. New paint, new lawn, a fresh family living inside, kids playing with a dog in the yard, no trace of Evan, no trace of the lies. And every time I see it, I think about how close I came to giving up. How easy it would have been to keep my mouth shut. But I didn't. Because sometimes the only way to fix what's broken isn't to wish it away. It's to rebuild one nail at a time, one truth at a time. And the best revenge is living in the house they tried to steal with your head held high and the front door wide open. Because I didn't just get the house back, I got me back. And that, my friends, is a better ending than Evan will ever have.